represents the Friends of Earth Europe. She'll share her insights on the European perspective of green economy recovery, i.e. the recovery plans after the pandemic and the lockdowns that will include green policies. After Molly, the two representatives of the regions will speak. Svitlana Romanko, she's a representative of 350.org EECA. She'll cover the region and she will speak about Ukraine in detail. Our third speaker is Georgii Safonov. He'll share us some insights on the Russian plans of recovery. This is the upcoming discussion. After all panelists have their say, we will have a discussion in the country groups. And there we will discuss as the public, as the NGO and CSO representatives can work towards making sure that green measures are a part of the recovery packages in our respective countries. Coming back to our first speaker, Europe. Yes, this is the correct slide. Molly, over to you. And yeah, over to you, Molly.
Too fast.
Yes, it's working. Interpreting's working. We can hear you. Yes, please. So sorry, we're experiencing difficulties with the English track. We're getting messages from the chat that there's an issue with the English track.
Into the English channel. There is an interpretation button in the bottom.
Is this working now? Do you hear me in the English channel?
Yeah, now it's working.
Okay, okay,
and
great.
Be sure to mute the original audio also so you don't hear both languages.
Yes.
It's right there. Look at the screen. We show you how it looks.
Yeah, I have it. Yeah, great.
Yes.
Okay. Molly, after you've chosen the English track, below, please select the mute original audio mode. Otherwise, you'll hear both languages simultaneously. Thank you, and please continue.
Great. Okay, sorry for the technical bumps. As I was saying, I'm coming to you here from Brussels. I'm working in Brussels in the EU institutions. I work for Friends of the Earth Europe. So many of you will know Friends of the Earth Europe, BUND in Germany. And I work in the office which relates to the Commission, the European Parliament, and we also follow the Council discussions. But we're not only limited to the EU, and we have many members across Eastern Europe, at least one of whom is on this call. So we also work with our members who are covering the energy community. We work on COP, on the international climate issues. So we don't just follow the EU things. I'm going to speak today a little bit about the European Green Deal, what it started out as and what it is becoming now. So when this commission started, obviously it was before the pandemic. And if you remember, way back to 2018, 2019. In Western Europe, at least, there was a wave of climate activism. There was the Fridays for Future demonstrations. There was a lot of young people on the street demanding climate action, demanding their future in the way that there had never been before. And this started to translate into political outcomes. So the new commission, they thought that they needed to do something to answer these student strikes and to answer the green votes that were happening across Western Europe. And Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, with Franz Timmermans, the vice president for the European Green Deal, they came up with a new package of plans and ideas called the European Green Deal. The basis of this idea was much stronger originally and much more progressive, and was called the Green New Deal, and came mostly from actors in the US, from Alexander Ocasio-Cortez, one of the main proponents of the Green New Deal. But the EU took it over and made it not so strong, but want to put it into practice. So before the pandemic, the European Green Deal was an idea how to transition Europe to being more sustainable. It includes some of them, I can't name everything that includes, but some of the main things were what they call a farm to fork strategy, looking at sustainable food and agriculture, with the aim of making our food system more compatible with nature, so that our food and farming system works together with nature rather than harming it. That was the farm to fork strategy. On energy, there's a lot of talk about just transition. Just transition means ensuring that workers who work in old industries, in coal or steel or mining, that these workers have new jobs to go to, that there's funding and support for these workers and for their communities to transition. So we talk about a just transition where nobody's left behind. And that means particularly the workers and their communities. And there's a just transition fund for regions in decline, regions where, for example, in Poland, where there's a lot of coal mining and coal burning. Another part of it was the renovation wave. So renovation is about energy efficiency. Nearly half of European citizens live in some kind of energy poverty. This means that they can't afford to heat their homes, or they can't afford to cool their homes. So energy poverty is not just about being too cold in the winter, it's about not being able to cool down in the summer as well. And for people who have less income, or who are older, or who live in bad quality housing, this is a very big problem. And this was something that the European Commission promised that they would tackle with a wave of renovation. So renovating and upgrading the homes that people live in. Also central to the European Green Deal was a commitment that Europe should be climate neutral or have net zero by 2050. So that means that there would be no more emissions by 2050, go to climate neutral. And that's definitely the right destination. That's where we should be going to net zero. But we say that 2050 is not soon enough. If we look at the commitments under the Paris Agreement, if we look at what the science demands in the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, we see that 2050 is too late for rich industrialized countries like the EU to cut their emissions to zero. It needs to be done much sooner. And we have a demand for 2030, that the EU should be at net zero by 2030. And that was the original idea of the European Green Deal. There were some more things in it, but that was the idea. And then came the pandemic, then came Corona, which nobody involved in the European Green Deal anyway had predicted. And Naomi also already earlier outlined some of the ways in which the action on Corona can give us hope for climate action. So it was politicians listening to scientists, which is a demand that we always have on climate. And it was people changing the way they live, or their lifestyles, or their mode of living, mostly to be in solidarity with others. So people weren't doing it for private gain. They were doing it to prevent more vulnerable people in society dying, or to prevent us overusing a resource, the resources of our health system. So that was very interesting, and that gave us quite a lot of hope that such drastic action could be taken. Of course, with climate change, we have a bit more time. We don't need to do everything in 3 weeks, but we don't have much more time. And so naturally, the Corona pandemic took up all the time and energy that politicians were needing for talking about the climate crisis. So all the meetings, all the press conferences, everything was about Corona rather than about climate. And that was a concern for us. And we were also afraid that climate action would be forgotten, or climate action would be let fall aside now because of the pandemic. But luckily, that seems, in Brussels at least, to be not what's happening. There were 17 member states who signed a letter to the European Commission saying that the European Green Deal must remain a strong priority for the EU. And now what we see is a situation where the European Green Deal is becoming the European Green Recovery. So we see the Commission talking about how this money that's being put into the European economies, it must be compatible with the European Green Deal. That's some nice words, and we've seen member states doing some things that are potentially not in line with that, like bailing out airlines without conditions. Yeah, in Estonia, for example, they started building a new oil shale plant during the Corona crisis. So it doesn't always work out the way they say. But the one good thing is that they're speaking about a green recovery now. So they're saying that as we come out of this crisis, the stimulus money that we put into our economies, it must also help us stop climate change. And yeah, we also heard this morning the talk about localism and local resilience. And discussions of local resilience have been quite high on the agenda at the moment with Corona. Our demands is that this stimulus package, and we're going to have a big announcement from the EU this week about the budget, the multi-annual framework. So I'm trying not to use abbreviations. It's quite difficult sometimes. We will have a big announcement where they will talk about how the finances in Brussels will be used. And there we hope that they will stick to their promise that all this recovery mechanisms need to be in line with the European Green Deal. So what we say is that local resilience should be funded. So in the food system, we need to keep supply chains short where possible so that people are growing their food where they need it. And also particularly on energy. We've worked a lot on the ownership of energy. Local energy projects can be a really good way to transition away from fossil fuels, but also to increase community resilience so that people are back working together in their communities. Once social distancing is over, we can start to rebuild the social life in the communities, in our towns and our villages and our cities. We're looking for municipal ownership of energy. We're looking for collaborations between community projects, putting solar panels on the roof of a school or the roof of a municipal building. And this is our demand from the European Green Deal right now, because we think we not only need to recover our economy, but we also need to ensure that there are other co-benefits, like stronger social cohesion and stronger local communities. I'll leave it there for now, and I'm interested to hear questions.
Thank you, Molly. I'll be switching to Russian again.
Molly, thank you very much for painting the general picture, what is happening in the EU, what was the agenda before the pandemic, and what is happening now, what are our expectations. And now we are moving to our region. And I would like to give the floor to Svitlana Romanko. Svitlana will tell us, as far as I know, about the region in general, but will also speak specifically about Ukraine.
Здравствуйте,
Svitlana,
спасибо за приглашение.
Hello,
И
thank you
за
very
то, что
much
мы
for having
обсуждаем сегодня
invited
такие
me,
важные
and thank you
темы
for
для
discussing such
и нашего
crucial
региона, и наших
topics,
стран. Большое
both for
спасибо
our
за
region as well as for all our countries. Svetlana, we cannot
Ну,
hear you.
Я включилась. Слышно меня?
Can you hear me now? You have to make sure that you have Russian channel on at the bottom where you have the globe icon. Choose Russian and mute original
У меня
audio.
просто нету никакого здесь.
I don't see this function at the bottom. There is an icon. Svetlana, can you hear me? At the bottom, there is the black bar. There you will find the globe icon. Click on this icon and choose Russian.
Нет, у меня нету этого
значка. This icon. No, I don't have it. How about I switch to English?
Так, а вот так вот.
How about now?
Сейчас слышно меня?
Can you hear me now?
На английском слышно.
We can hear you in English.
Да, я даже не знаю, что такое.
I wonder.
Тебе нужно выбрать...
We hear you in the English channel. Because otherwise we'll not be able to interpret. Maybe Svetlana could present in English.
Ну, хорошо, в принципе, но просто у меня нету сейчас минутку.
Svetlana, are you sure that
у меня нет, у меня, видимо, какая-то версия программы не та. Вот, ну хорошо, я могу сейчас уже поздно, наверное, переключаться. И хорошо, я тогда могу и рассказать на английском, если нужно.
Make my presentation in English if necessary. Yeah, then let's do that in English. Thank you.
Хорошо.
Okay.
Сейчас попробуем.
Give me one
hello,
moment.
It's anyway good to be here today and speak even in English. It's no problem with that. I hope everyone will understand or get properly translated. What I would like to talk today about, it's about just recovery in general as a concept, and just recovery as a main framework. We decided to start working within our region last month, as building public campaigns and trying to make public pressure on governments and decision making while they are still deciding what a recovery plan should be developed for every country of 12 countries of EECCA region. Please, a second slide, Helen. And here, I would what we've done so far. It was more like quick reaction on the world and global taking off trend of and danger at the same time, and dangers that civil society rights voices and needs actually are being put behind on the needs of the big companies, corporations, and those who were in the crisis too. I mean, coal, oil, and gas corporations, especially coal and oil, who wanted to receive more attention and state support in the different times. I would like to also highlight that there is no vaccine to climate crisis, and Ursula den Leyen said this month, and we cannot refuse of transition to a green energy anyway if we still want a climate neutral future for us and for not only European countries, when we of course take into account in the region, but also for countries with the less developed economies, as our region countries mostly are. So what we've done so far, understanding that the climate crisis is at the very center of pandemic crisis, and actually every other crisis would be much more intense than even what we see for now, pandemic crisis, which government were not quite really well prepared to. So what we've done so far, we've drafted a letter thanks to our partners CAN as well, CAN EECCA, who supported us in doing that, and sent this letter with the 5 principles of a just recovery to 12 local governments. And because we were and we are still very committed to government's pressure, to make governments understand that they must be attentive to the details of what a resilient, sustainable, and green recovery actually is, and to ensure the greater resilience to further environmental and social crises ahead. So we sent it early April, I believe 9 of April or so, and globally over almost 500 different organizations, working unions, and youth movements, climate movements has supported and signed off this letter. And I guess among about 30 organizations and movements from EECCA region has signed off this letter too. And this letter was sent out to the governments, and we only started to receive the responses. So, so far we have 3 responses from Russian government, from Azerbaijan government, and from Kyrgyzstan government, which are in the detailed article here. Please, if you're interested to read it afterwards, please just go to the link. It's in a presentation on slide 5, and you can read more about what these governments responded. But actually, what I clarified so far with that responses given, that what tools do we have as a public civil society NGOs to make a real pressure on those governments? Because they are just sending you a letters and saying, yeah, we are following these principles of a just recovery and giving you examples, but we never know for sure, and we never can be sure enough, do they really take measures to for a just and a green recovery as they are declaring? So our proposal to that is actually to have some joint regional discussions and working groups, but at the same time to create country level working groups, so-called ad hoc groups of experts and actually active citizens and active NGOs players, to make a real pressure based on country-specific needs on a just recovery in every country. We have seen this process going forward within Russia, for example, where 15 local NGOs has joined their forces and wrote a very detailed specific letter with the requirements to Russian government. And only the country level pressure may be sufficient enough to make the needed pressure on the local governments. And we are also building the same processes within Kyrgyzstan, Georgia, and Ukraine, trying to adjust the very globally centered and focused just recovery strategies, more closely fitted and adjusted to the local grounds and local campaign needs. So the next plan, what I could really propose to make this pressure sufficient enough and powerful enough are the first one, please, third slide, Helen, thank you. Yeah, what we should do more we should have so-called strategic impact assessment. Why strategic impact assessment? We should assess where are we now with our policies, with our green policies, with our social, economic, and so-called backgrounds for Green New Deal in every country of our region, just to have this assessment. In Ukraine, we just actually have this released today, the assessment of European Green Deal made by leading national experts. So we basically have this impact assessment, what was happening before we started to implement the demands of a Green New Deal. So we now can better use it in our public campaigns, because not every organization who is campaigning for just and green recovery is actually expert organization or has the funds or abilities to make these expert assessments and expert analysis, because it's very time and resources consuming. So in Ukraine, we already started this, and we can move further. And for example, try to stress upon on the few areas of a Green New Deal as we considered to before all the process of European green concept and transformation till 2050 has been started. And one very important output from me, as we were successfully campaigning towards 100% renewable energy transition till 2050 in the region, and has got commitments from 7 cities to transit to 100% renewables. And these cities were indeed making realistic steps on implementing this. But my output of the current political and economic and energy crisis in Ukraine, and the campaign results as well, and a Green New Deal analysis, which we've made within 350 ourselves, is saying that we definitely need to be more comprehensive and make a very, very complete campaign goals, not just trying to adjust one sphere, for example, 100% renewable energy transition, while all other 11 areas of a Green Deal are under attention. Next, this slide has an analysis what measures has already been taken within our region to just to set up the legal quarantine regimes and try to make this implement just recovery measures. And on the right side, you can see how many funds the European Union is going to implement into that. And our countries of the region have a particular interest into getting this funding, because it's a last chance for us to have more funding to rebuild our infrastructures, our green and clean energy facilities, and to get this actually pushed to a Green New Deal. So we definitely need to be a part of this. And our civil society need to campaign more hard to achieving these goals, toward achieving these goals. And next slide, please. Yeah, I see there is almost no time left, but we will have a discussion afterwards, so we have plenty of time. We are waiting with impatience on this new Green and Fair Recovery Plan, so-called Green Deal Recovery Package, which will be probably potentially announced May 27, which is tomorrow. So I've put some pre-analysis of the main spheres, and what I was quietly surprised for, it's about the privilege of and benefits for green hydrogen, specifically being put from a center of renewable energy sources development. And we need to actually evaluate how this green hydrogen theory could be localized within our green economies in our countries of EECCA, particularly in Ukraine, in Russia, and other countries. And next slide, please. We are about to end. Thank you. These are funds which actually have been proposed to accumulate and to invest into the green economy. But what I like about the European Green Deal and Green Recovery Strategy is a long-term strategy that proposes to make a long-term budget till 2027 at least, which we cannot see we ever have been planned in any of country of our region, including like any country. In Ukraine, only 2 months, like it's not even ready as a plan of immediate reaction and just recovery of economy from these dangers and risks. The same situation is in Russia, and as far as I know, the absolutely same measures only taken till the end of 2020 are being in place in other countries of our region, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and others. So we definitely need to adjust our long-term strategies. And we as a civil society should be really active in campaigning for that long-term strategies and goals, because when you have long-term strategy, it makes more difficult from governments to escape from their commitments made and officially adopted as a plans. Yes. Thank you. And the last slide, please, not for talking and for discussion, but just for you to know how you can join if you would like to join our regional discussions and be a part of the regional work on a just and a green recovery. You may just to see the last slide, please. And very quickly, these materials will be in your presentation, and you can just follow and sign the open letter and join the regional panel of experts. And the very last, please, which is pink with a $sign and the S, yes, and the Earth, which symbolizes that Earth always wins, and we need to make it green, just, and fast. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Svitlana. And it's time to go to Georgii Safonov, who's the third speaker. And he'll update us on the situation in Russia regarding the green recovery. Georgii, what are the plans? You're welcome. Georgii, can you see the interpreting? I can hear you very well in Russian. I cannot hear you in the Russian track, though. Just a moment, then.
Один момент.
A moment, please. Look at the panel below.
Раз.
You see the icon of the planet over there below.
Так.
Please select Russian.
Есть.
Angelina, I've selected it. George, great. Please remember to mute your original audio.
Выключил.
I have muted. Lovely. The floor is yours.
Хорошо бы показывать.
Oh, I need to demonstrate the screen. You have 7 minutes, George.
Хорошо. Да.
We can hear some echo coming from you, Georgii.
Какой-то из...
Please turn one of the mics off. Okay. Okay, I'll use my laptop mic then. Next slide, please. Go ahead, Georgii. It's working now. Next slide, please. Well, the issue we discussed today is complex. On the one hand, it's the coronavirus crisis, and the planet is fighting that crisis. But the ramifications related to climate crisis are more grave and are upcoming. And between them, there's another fighter caught between these two, the economic crisis. It's also quite big. Not as big as the climate one, but it's still quite big. So today I'd like to present some of my thoughts on how we could potentially escape all the three crises consecutively or simultaneously. I would like to reflect on our capabilities to analyze these situations. Know thy enemy. That is crucial. We need to know exactly what this crisis is. We need to have a comprehensive idea. And there are some specific features that are significant. And this brings together all the three crises: the climate crisis, the economic crisis, and the coronavirus crisis. First and foremost, all of them are global. All countries are affected by the crisis globally. It's also comprehensive, it's cross-cutting. It affects all sectors of the economy. On top of that, it affects global supply chains of the raw materials, of products, of services. This global part is crucial. Over the last 30 years, the world was ever more globalized. Countries depended on another countries on supplying products, spare parts, software, hardware. And this dependency was increasingly big. Therefore, disrupting those supply chains affects the global economy. We have seen this after the global health emergency broke out. This is a very fast crisis. Pace is of utmost importance. If the pace is very fast, we can't adapt fast enough. Neither the economy nor the people are capable of adapting, and the environment cannot do that as well. It's a deep crisis. There's a lot of uncertainty, which lead to the feelings of uncertainty with the investors, with the economic agents, with the people. There is a sentiment that this crisis is here to stay. We hope it will pass soon, but the fact that the length of this crisis is uncertain creates major stumbling blocks. This is the crisis not of the supply, because we can supply lots of technology or lots of resources, but there are no consumers. This is the demand crisis, and that might lead to a lengthy economic decline because there's not enough demand in the economy. It differs depending on the country. What we see in the EU is aid being provided to small companies and businesses for them to create additional demand. And this is a robust step. If you take Russia, though, there are no measures to support the demand. Demand is plummeting, and reviving the demand fast is difficult and is impossible, which means this is going to be a protruded crisis. Enormous losses, falling GDP, well, but the GDP is an abstract concept, but we can see also the employment decline, surging unemployment. USA is a textbook example, but not only the USA, but also the Eastern Europe and Central Asian countries are sure suffering from that problem. Social and economy losses are comparable to those of the related to the military conflicts. These are significant effects that are here already. There is no easy way to tackle these several crises. At least I don't see them. So I will not engage in blue sky thinking about tackling this crisis soon. However, I'd like to chart the course of where we might head towards tackling partially or fully these issues. Next slide, please. Right, the previous slide. What sectors are affected? At first sight is the services sector. Sometimes it's called the hospitality sector. Notably, for Russia, But not only, I'm sure. Hospitality sector is vital. Back in the USSR, this sector only had about 20% share. Today, though, this sector has 50% of the share for all former Soviet countries these days. This creates jobs. These are small and medium-sized businesses, cafes, restaurants, resorts, tourism, etc., etc. And GDP-wise, this is an important and significant sector, but this sector is also significant in terms of employment. And it was probably the most severely affected. Next sector, energy. The demand for oil and gas plummeted globally, not simply declined. Therefore, export-dependent economies, those economies dependent on energy supplies, are in a bind, and that happened almost overnight. Negative prices for oil and for gas, I mean, in Europe these days, so they give you additional money for buying some part of those resources. It's related to overstock storing spaces. There's an excess of those resources. Next sector, the industry, especially the car industry. There's a deep decline, and also for the construction as well. They continue building, but we don't know who's going to buy those. Next sector, transport. Obviously, the flights. They're plummeting these days, and Germany has initiated something like not nationalization, but major aid packages for the companies of Lufthansa. But this is true for Aeroflot and other flight operators. Next slide, please. George, we are terribly pressed for time. Okay, I'm going to speed up. Now, what are the way outs? Option 1, the cheapest, is retaining the old models, just bearing with this for a little longer, and just continue the growth based on brown economy export of resources and relying on major producers and manufacturers. Well, this is typical of Russia, and I'm convinced this is the case for many other countries. Very feeble, weak stimuli for innovations. You know, this like fake R&D, bureaucratic barriers, red tape, inefficient institutions. We've been there and we've done that, and this is like one of the actual models to tackle the crisis. Option 2, our favorite option, the active Green Deal with the energy transition, with the carbon-free technologies that are implemented not only in the energy sector, but also in the transport sector and in the industry. This involves major support from the government, and this is demonstrated in Europe and in other countries. There is a large toolbox to help businesses become greener. Government procurement, phasing out the fossil fuels, subsidies, these tools are known and they are actionable in stimulating to green transition, as well as investment in long-term transition, investment in education and invention and research, etc. Next option, option number 3, option number 3.33333. These are half-hearted measures, as I would call it, nothing too much. It's likely to happen in many countries of our region, where governance systems aren't prepared for new events, and they avoid any new introduction, just to be on the safe side approach. What if something goes wrong? Who will be held accountable? And it prone to old lobbying and prone to the lobbying of the old sectors, those who are afraid of risking However, what the knowledge that comes from venture investment, it knows there's 1% of success and 99% of projects are likely to fail. But these 1% of successful projects is likely to break even. Therefore, this is our favorite greenwashing. We're just going to pretend we take action. This happens in Russia, in Kazakhstan, a great deal of that. I mean, I worked with Kazakhstan a lot, and I sort of regret the greenwashing is big there. They said, we are investing in the renewable energy, but take a look at the balance. 98% is coal-based energy. I mean, you see the lovely charts, but hardly any outcomes. The next slide, please. This is the penultimate slide. Do we have any idea of what should be done? This is the latest data on decarbonization, the Russian economy. It's like a very robust NDC that would really aim to meet the Paris Agreement target. So we calculated the business as usual scenario where we simply carry on. This is the top left chart in blue. And we also looked at two more ambitious scenarios where we enhance the targets or we go for decarbonization at full speed. We have an awareness of what should be done in energy, in transport, in the industry, in the buildings, in the forestry. And we know the share of each of those sectors to improve energy efficiency, on switching to renewable energy or switching to different transport technology. Oh, Olga Sanova is asking a good question, actually. None of this is a part of carbon-free development plan for Russia, comes from the Ministry of Ecology. Zero. Not. Next slide, please. Right, I'd like to make a small announcement here. I hope that Sonia Schirmbeck would allow me to say the following, that we are about to release another document. Yesterday, I mentioned a climate document, whereas today, I want to say that there's a publication on green growth and innovation in EECCA region. We analyzed 20 countries, and as some of the findings here, there are stark differences on the environmental friendliness, GDP growth. Green innovations are underdeveloped in all countries because borrowing innovation is a key instrument from other countries. Support for green innovation institutions are there in the media. Apparently, one could boast about them, then praising to them, but they're actually inefficient. It's a type of greenwashing as well. And for green growth and innovation requires a lot of work. And I'd like to note that some countries are exceedingly successful here, like Slovenia. It's a small country that has major advances in green innovation. Does this affect the greenness of the economy growth? I can't say. Well, it has an impact. It's not significant. It's not the definitive though. Take Slovakia. It's a different country. And their innovation is not that high in terms of greeniness. But still, their GDP growth is greener. So the links between the innovation and the greenness of the growth is not that straightforward. And this should not be overlooked, because in terms of tackling crisis and making this green, We need institution. We need to know their modalities of work. And this publication was an attempt to analyze those factors and find approaches that work and approaches that don't, and find a reason for the absence of the link. Why there's reluctance in green investment. And we tried to look at whether our economy is becoming greener. I was disappointed at times. We had excellent discussion with Sonia. I wanted to factor the Poland into our analysis because Poland was at the forefront of the green development in early 2000s, but we took a closer look, and that was not the case. Caveats abound. I wanted to make a thorough analysis of Kazakhstan. Sonia and I were having a discussion whether their measures were effective indeed. In Georgia, there are institutions that are working in green transitions that have been officially declared. And this is a very helpful conversation, especially when you consider tackling these three crises. It's not that it's impossible, it's just exceedingly hard. It's challenging. We need to know exactly what roles are required to make sure that the recovery is green indeed. Thank you so much. Thank you, friends. Any clarifications for either of the speakers or for any of the panelists? If you don't have any clarifications, then Yelena, please share the Mentimeter survey slide.
And we would like to ask 2 questions. We need you to make a small contribution because we want to find out more about what the situation is like in your countries before we start working in breakout groups. So please go to the well-known website, Mentimeter, which is menti.com, with the balloons that everybody liked so much yesterday. So please go to menti.com website and enter the code 88990. First question is, what are the obstacles for the green recovery efforts in your country? And question number 2, how can you promote green recovery in your country? But we see different questions there. Me too. I also have a different question. And Galina, there was a different question in Mentimeter now. What was the most useful, helpful, or interesting? I think Lotte will help us now. I checked it 10 minutes ago and everything was fine. I would update it. Everything is fine. You just have to renew the page and everything will be fine. It works. All's fine. And here we see answers coming up on the screen. But this is the wrong question. Yes, sorry. Here we can see different answers submitted: absence of funding, absence of political will, political crisis, corruption, lobby of fossil fuel, money matter more than green future, very powerful lobby, absence of political support. So there are very many similar issues and challenges that different countries faced. Interests of public corporations that are controlling fossil fuels, old monopolies and oligarchs, legislation, absence of finance. Very many people are actually mentioning finance, priorities, what is the economic priority, legislation again, lobbying by the companies. Very similar challenges in all the countries. Yes. So it is, friends. Gulshan also mentions in the chat box about absence of finance, low level of public engagement in decision-making process. So I suggest we go on to the next question. How can you promote green recovery plan in your country? What can you do?